Hey guys, what's up? So today we're going to be talking about the only essential movements that you need to do to be successful in a strength training program. And these three types of movements, when done routinely, give you the biggest bang for your buck. There's three categories that as long as they are checked, you'll have almost all of your bases covered. And the great news is anybody of any ability level can do these movements. So if you want to know the only exercises that you are ever going to need to get and stay in shape, build muscle, and lose fat, you are at the right video. Stay tuned, we're going to talk about it. So when I tell people that I'm a trainer, they always want to know the same things. Hey David, what's your favorite exercise?
What's the best exercise routine?
If you had to pick one exercise, what would it be? What exercises should I be doing? There's so many exercises, I just want a simple program. Can you just give me a simple program? What do you like to do for exercise?
Well, I'm going to tell you. And it's very simple. Follow these three movement patterns and you too will know exactly what you're going to do every time that you go into the gym. Hey, what's up guys? David Vanderheyden here, your personal pathfinder in your fitness journey. And today we're going to be talking about the three essential movement patterns that you need in every exercise program. So our last episode was the first feature-length video, and one does not simply make episode 0 without talking about what you're going to be talking about. But today, I'm finally going to be able to talk about how to set up a basic strength training program. So that is why I am excited. I hope you're excited too, because this is going to be one of those things where I oversimplify things so that you can understand it easily. And then later, I make it more complicated and show you all the options, but hopefully by the end of it, it won't be that confusing. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I just want to boil it down to the essential details that you need to know. And then there's also people who maybe they're not overwhelmed, but they've overcomplicated their program. And they're doing so many different isolation type movements, like I'm thinking of bodybuilders, for example, where they're doing so many different isolation movements, they don't actually know like what's the most important stuff they should be doing, and they got to get back to the basics and back to these primary movements, these primary movement patterns, these functional movement patterns. Either way, you've come to the right place. I'm gonna give you some guidelines, and then by the end of the video, you should be ready to start selecting exercises that are right for you. So let's talk about those three categories, those three fundamental movement patterns that you're gonna have to put into every program. So I'm gonna give you these three simple movement patterns, but realize that even though it's very simple, you have infinite creativity when it comes to selecting what exercises you wanna fit within those categories. And people like creativity, right? Keeps things fresh. It's the spice of life. Variety is the spice of life, and you've gotta find just the right amount of spice in your program to make sure that you don't get bored of it. So what are the three fundamental movements? Well, drum roll please. First movement is pushing, second one is pulling, and the third one is curling. That's right, bicep curls. Oh, what's that? It's not bicep curls? Are you sure? What about the guys who do all those bicep curls in the gym? What? You mean there's such a thing as a leg day? Oh, you mean like doing a leg day. Leg day, people, that's right. You gotta do pushing, pulling, and squatting. Those are the three fundamental movements. If you have those three movement patterns, you're set. All you gotta do is pick the specific exercises that fit into those categories and you are golden. But one note before we go on, when I refer to the squat, I'm technically talking about what's also called a hinge too, okay? So when you're hinging, you're actually doing part of the squat. You're just doing a hinge with a knee bend and an ankle bend. So hope that doesn't confuse anybody, but going forward, the hinge and the squat are kind of gonna be used interchangeably in the exercise program. And before we continue on with the push-pull legs program examples, take a quick second to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're already a subscriber, make sure that you like the video, because the likes are the lifeblood of this channel. I mean, hey, in the future, you might as well just like the video at the beginning, and then if for whatever reason I don't earn your like, just go ahead and remove the like later at the end of the video if you didn't learn anything. So anybody in the fitness community who's ever done any programming before knows this is the push, pull, and legs routine. So push, pull, and legs is super commonly used, but there's a reason for it. It's the three fundamental movement patterns. So let's talk about the push day, right? So pushing or pressing movements would be anything where you're pushing away from your body horizontally, pushing away diagonally, or pushing straight up in the air. So obviously with a push routine, you're gonna be doing things like push-ups, you're gonna be doing bench press, you're gonna be doing an overhead press if your shoulders can tolerate that. Anything that where you're flipping a tire or pushing up in a diagonal direction. But also there's these isolation type movements where you push individual limbs away from your body. So for example, if I were to extend my elbow, I'm pushing something away from my body. Like for example, when you do a tricep extension with a rope, or maybe you do like a dip, for example, and you're doing dips where you're dipping your body down and you're pressing vertically up towards the ceiling. And then some examples of pulling exercises would be anywhere where you're vertically pulling, horizontally pulling, diagonally pulling, or you're just kind of curling something towards you. So examples of that would be like when you're doing a pull down, when you're doing a pull up, any kind of rowing movement would be a pull exercise. An example with the arms would be doing a bicep curl. When you're curling something towards you, you're pulling it towards yourself, right? Also, if you're doing what's called a face pull, where you grab onto the cables and you pull it back this way, that's great for your postural muscles. And then for legs, you got a whole wide variety of exercises, but they're mostly just variations of squats, right? So when you're doing the squat or hinge, that would be doing things like the squat, and you have the deadlift. So the squat can be done even without a barbell, if you just have a dumbbell or a kettlebell, or just with body weight, or if you want to do lunges, for example. Those would all be examples of squats. Sprinting is technically building up those same kind of muscles, so that would work as well. And then the other big leg movement would be a hinge movement, okay? For example, when you're doing deadlifts, okay, you're bending down, you're keeping your back straight and pulling something off the floor. So if you can incorporate squatting and some form of hip hinging, you're pretty much covering all of your bases. But if I had to pick one, it would probably be the squat for most people, just because they don't have the technique to keep their back straight in order to do the deadlift. Now there are tons of other leg exercises that you could do in isolation, but if you just focus on the big ones, the squat and the hinge, those two are going to give you the most bang for your buck. Everything else is going to be for just sculpting the booty a little bit here or there, or maybe working on the calves, but basically the squat and the hinge are where it's at. And also, when I say hinge and hinging at the hips, you should also be thinking of anything that incorporates a hip thrust, where you're thrusting your pelvis forward and engaging the glutes. So all these pushing, pulling, and leg movements that you can do can be done with free weights, they can be done with machines, you can do them with body weight. You basically just have to kind of scale it based off of your experience level and how much weight you want to be pulling or how much resistance you want to have. So for example, somebody who wants to do a great push routine, if they're very weak and they can't do a push-up, then I wouldn't just automatically do body weight for this stuff like that. But a squat would be great for them to do because they can do a body weight version of a squat. But they might have to use a machine or dumbbells or a barbell or something like that when they're first trying to learn how to do maybe a bench press, so that they can build up to doing more things like push-ups. If you guys want to see modified versions of stuff like that, I'll also be showing you how you can do modified versions of body weight exercises that don't require any equipment at all. So hopefully those examples help you guys out, but if you want to know the exact specific details of how many reps you should do, how many sets, and other specific exercises that would work for you, and a lot of other useful info to refine your approach, check out my website at onelifetolift.com/shop. to download one of my very affordable training programs. Then if you want, you can print out the program or pull it up on your phone whenever you go to the gym, and you'll have confidence going forward. So push-pull and legs is super commonly used, but there's a reason for it. It's the 3 fundamental movement patterns. However, it's not the perfect program where it's like this super simple program is going to work for every specific population. For example, if you have a bodybuilder, you're much more likely to chop up this program into smaller movements where you focus on each individual muscle groups per day. And they're going to incorporate those more isolation type movements so that they can sculpt individual muscles as per needed with a higher volume than someone else would. Now, an athlete would probably incorporate more sport-specific movements into their program. So yeah, they're going to push, pull, and do leg routines, but they're also going to have a lot more rotational components because they do a lot of throwing and swinging and twisting around and pivoting up on different axes, okay? So they're gonna need some more of those rotational components, but a strong man really just wants to pick things up and put them down. So those guys are gonna incorporate push, pull, and legs, but they're also gonna incorporate more specific carrying movements and make sure that that stuff is specific to whatever task they're doing. So if they're gonna be carrying stuff in their arms, they wanna be doing more carrying movements. So there are many paths to get towards your goal of being in shape, and everybody's gonna be a little bit different. And I wanna provide a very simplified approach that is the very popular 3-day push, pull, and leg split, but you can split up your exercises however you want as long as you're getting the right amount of volume in per week. So we're gonna define volume as like the total number of sets that you get in throughout the week. And you can think of it as like the total amount of pounds that you're lifting just in general. So if you take how many sets that you're doing, and you multiply it by the amount of pounds that you're lifting, that's the total amount of volume that you do throughout the week. And that total volume for the week is gonna be the same whether you decide to do all of your exercises each day or whether you try to split it up into push, pull, and legs all across the week. For example, you could do push, pull, and legs on all 3 days and then just do a third of the amount of sets that you would normally do if you did each day individually. So you don't have to do each day individually where today is a push day and tomorrow is a pull day and then the next day is a leg day, although you could do that, and that's kind of how I prefer to do things. I know that there's people out there who like to do whole body routines, and you can just keep on repeating those whole body routines with just a third the amount of volume that you would do as if you just did it all on 3 separate occasions. Now technically there are more than just 3 fundamental movements. You can actually break each one of these fundamental movements into subcategories. So if you're gonna include all the different type of movements, there's pushing, there's pulling, you can hip hinge where you just move at just the hips, you can squat where you bend at the hip, knees, and ankles, you can jump, you can lunge, you can carry or drag something, you can run into a sprint, throw. But technically, if you take one of the 3 main categories, it breaks down into those subsections. So let's take, for example, the squat. The squat is where you bend your hips, knees, and ankles, okay? You squat down, and then if you just split that in half, so you got one leg out in front and one leg behind, you have a split squat, AKA a lunge. Then we have the hip hinge. You can think of maybe doing a deadlift or bending over and picking something off the ground, right? So that hinging of the hips where you're kind of bending forward in like kind of like a bow, that's just the movement of the hips. But if you bend the hips at the same time as you bend your knees, that is a squat. So you can see how the squat is this big movement, and if you just kind of dissect that into its components, you have lunging, sprinting, hip hinging, all these other isolation kind of categories. Even throwing is an example of a push and pull in combination with each other. So for example, if I'm about to throw something, I have to pull one arm in as I push the other. Now technically carrying is somewhat more of a unique movement pattern, but I'm not really gonna put that into the push-pull legs routine unless you really are a strong man or somebody who likes to just kind of get a good mix of strength and conditioning in the same movement. So I've excluded carries from this program. Also, I should probably mention that this video doesn't cover cardio, so make sure that you still do cardio, okay? I recommend doing a HIIT style program, high intensity interval training cardio, but regular cardio will do as well. I've done a podcast on HIIT cardio before. I think it's episode 4, might be wrong on that. I'll leave a link somewhere down below or maybe on the screen here where you guys can check out whatever I'm putting on the screen here. But cardio should probably be viewed as a separate thing from your strength training program. So I'd still recommend that if you're doing 3 days a week, doing a push, pull, and legs routine, that you're still getting in a majority of the days a week with cardio too. So basically, if you're doing like 3 days of push, pull, and legs, your other 4 days should probably be cardio, right? Now, ideally, you'd be working out every day of the week, but if you can't, still doing like 2 or 3 days of cardio is a lot better than doing 0, okay? Now technically you don't need to do any cardio if you want to try to just get muscle, but I really recommend for younger people especially to try to build up their cardiovascular fitness. If cardio seems like too much of a time commit for you, you can totally just do your cardio on the same day as your strength training program. But for more details like that, check out the programs. I'll give you guys some examples of how you can incorporate all that stuff. So let's talk about the advantages of why you would do a push, pull, and legs kind of routine in the first place. So the first advantage is that you would only require 3 days a week minimum to maintain this program. Very easy for most people to do. I know a lot of people say that they only have 1 day a week to work out. Those people are probably not gonna be successful, unfortunately. You need 2 or 3 days a week to work out. Maybe upper body or lower body split would be good, but even better would be able to tease that apart into a push, pull, and legs routine. However, if you wanna just take all that and cram it into 1 day, you can do that 3 days a week, and then you don't have to do a crazy amount of volume throughout the week, okay? So that's an advantage. You can hit all your big muscle groups in 3 days and be done with it, which is great. And then you can even repeat that twice. So you can work out 6 days a week, repeat the whole program twice in 1 week, and then you get twice the results, twice as fast. Also, if you follow a push-pull legs routine, you get more variety than doing full body movements every single time, like a whole body workout. The other advantage is that you also get more variety by doing just a 3-day split rather than doing the same thing every single time you go into the gym. I know people who do these circuit routines around the machines at every gym that they go to, and it gets monotonous, okay? You're limiting yourself, and if you're always doing these full body movements or these group fitness classes where they have you do all these crazy routines and stuff like that, and then you get something injured, it's like you kind of don't know what to do because you don't know how to program around that injury. So you have a weak link in the chain, and then you're not able to adapt. And this push-pull-legs program will allow you to adapt a little bit more. And when you only have to work out 3 days a week, if you miss a day, it's no big deal, okay? If life gets in the way, you're not totally throwing yourself out of whack. For example, when I used to take more of a bodybuilding approach, I would do biceps and triceps, and then traps, and then chest, and then legs, and if I missed one single day, it was like I was working out 6 or 7 days a week, and if I missed one day, I was thrown out of whack. I couldn't just stack the next day with twice as much exercises. It was just not very realistic. So I ended up just missing out on that muscle group, whereas if I just simplified it down to push, pull, and legs, I could easily miss a day and then make it up another day of the week. And the nice thing about the push, pull, and legs routine is that all the workouts are mutually exclusive. So all the pushing muscles that you would use, your chest and your triceps and the front of the shoulders, you don't use when you're doing your pulling exercises. So the pulling exercises uses your lats, your biceps, and your rear delts. And then when you're doing your legs, you're not using any of your upper body muscles unless you're doing deadlifts or something like that. And that's also mutually exclusive. So you could do all 3 days back to back and not be sore from any of the days that you just did. So you can do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, do all of your push, pull, and leg routine and be done and ready to repeat that routine if you wanted to for a second time during the week if you had extra time, which is great. But a lot of sports, for example, require a ton of pushing, like football and basketball. So if you are an athlete or something like that, you should think about what specific movements you do all the time and try to program in more of those basic fundamental movements, like pushing, for example, for a football player, into their routine more often. And really, the only other downside to the push-pull-leg routine is you might miss out on some very small isolation-style movements, like, for example, the side delts, okay? So if you don't throw in a little bit of side raises, maybe you might miss out on some of your side delt growth, okay? Maybe you're missing out on calves a little bit. Maybe you want to work on your hip abductors on the side of your hip a little bit. Maybe you want to work on your external rotators, okay? So it doesn't cover abs either, but abs can be done sort of a la carte. So I like to think of abs as your dessert at the end of the meal. So you do your push, pull, and legs as your bread and butter, you know, your meat and potatoes, okay, your main thing. And then at the end of those workouts, you can throw in a little pepper and a little bit of abs at the end, okay? And technically, when you're doing pushing and pulling movements on your feet, those incorporate your core muscles. So like you're bracing yourself when you're pulling. If you do a rotational kind of movement, you're bracing yourself as you rotate, as an anti-rotation kind of movement. So technically you can still get pretty good abs even without doing direct ab work. But I know everybody loves abs, so in the future, if you guys want me to upload some great ab routines, stay tuned. I'll have some examples for you and how you can incorporate them into a push-pull legs routine. So if you're worried about engaging your deep core muscles, try to incorporate more pushing and pulling movements that are done standing, okay? Anytime you can be doing things standing, you're gonna be bracing yourself, engaging those ab muscles more, and that should be sufficient for covering your abs. Besides, the best way to get your abs is by having a great diet, so stay tuned for more diet tips in the future. So that kind of wraps up the push-pull leg routine. What did you guys think? Pretty easy to follow, right? A lot of variety that you can spice things up with. What are you guys doing for your program right now? If you're doing a specific type of program for yourself, leave a comment down below and let me know exactly what you're doing so I can give it some friendly feedback and see whether or not it needs to be tweaked here or there. Now, when I leave feedback for you guys, I'm gonna use the feedback sandwich approach, which harkens back to episode 1 of the podcast, where I talk about how to give constructive feedback to somebody. And if you guys would like to shop the store, there's a feedback sandwich t-shirt on there that you can check out at onelifetolift.com/shop. Now, the fan response that we got from the last video was just superb, okay? You guys did a great job of commenting down on the video. Make sure that you do that on this video too, but let's see what people had to say about the first episode, which was welcome to my channel. Now, our first comment comes from a gent named Matt Mead. Matt says, quality video production, and this guy really knows his shit. Whoa, Matt. This is a family program. Easy on the language, but I like your enthusiasm. Second of all, this probably isn't really a family program, but I'll try to keep it clean for you guys. Second of all, he says an actual expert in the field and not just a guy talking. Wow, Matt, you really know how to make a guy feel swell. So thank you, Matt Mead, for commenting on this video. Appreciate your kind words, and we've clearly never met in person before, but I only assume that you're a very good-looking, well put together young man. And our second comment comes from a young lady named Judy. Judy comments, "Hi Dave. Number one, your hair looks fab." Hard to argue with that kind of logic. Second of all, someone spelled psychology wrong? What? You noticed a typo in my last video? Well, congratulations, because I specifically put that typo in the video to see if you guys were paying attention. Congratulations, you passed the test. And I can tell just from looking at your name and profile that you also probably have great hair, and you're also a very kind person with whom I have a lot of respect for, even though we've never met. And the other guy who made top 3 comments this week was someone named America 2001, who had 2 words, worth it. I hope it was worth it for you, America 2001. And so that wraps up our top 3 comments for the week. If you guys like to have your comments featured on a future video and you want to get my feedback, go ahead and comment down below. And you never know, I just might respond back to you in kind. So if you guys like this video, please consider subscribing to my Patreon, patreon.com/1L2L. And in case you guys haven't noticed, I actually redesigned my Patreon page so that it looks cooler now. So for as little as $2 a month, you can join my private Discord server where you can chat with other people in the Patreon community. You'll get access to Patreon exclusive posts, there's free t-shirts, there's discounts on all my merchandise and training programs. I'll give you a shout out in my video and feature you on my credits. And some of the higher tiers are pretty sweet. You actually get to be a guest on the show, suggest content, get one-on-one chat sessions with me, and even online training. So if any of those juicy Patreon perks jump out at you, check out the tiers that I have on Patreon. But of course, if you can't support me financially, you can always support me here, in your heart, by hearting this video on social media and sharing it with all of your friends. Hey guys, David from the future here. I know there's a lot of confusion going around with the coronavirus and people really want to know how to work out from home, so hopefully this video will help you guys, but I do plan on doing some live streams in the future, and those live streams can be found on my Facebook page. If you follow that Facebook page, you'll get notified whenever I do a live stream, and you can ask me any questions that you have, and I can use that for generating new ideas for videos. And I'm also going to try and upgrade my live streaming setup so that I can help people with online training. Anyways, we've got a lot of good stuff to look forward to in the future. Stay tuned for more good content coming up your way. And remember, you only have one life to live. See you later, guys.